the 2023 Genesis G90. If you watch any of my videos, you know for certain that I'm hard on Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis as a brand. I feel like they're constantly searching for their identity. And with the last G80 I drove, the Sport, I thought, man, they are 90% here. It was one of the best cars they ever made, and this is just a further extension of it. Yes, there are some gimmicks and some things that are just asinine and stupid, and other things that are just amazing. This is like a 90th percentile car. So I'm going to get into the negatives first. The door handle design. Unlike a BMW, when you have the key in your pocket, the proximity detection essentially knows when you're in the room and unlocks the doors. It lights up. This car, it seems to be flaky, and you have to wait for the door handles to come out because they're embedded in the door. Super slow. Things like the trunk. The trunk is pretty small for a car of this size. I know they prioritize the back seat space, but again, it's a big deal if you're packing a lot of luggage in. This car has the soft closed doors, and then of course the automatic opening doors to a certain point, and then it automatically closes. And I think that is a very gimmicky feature, but also has a cool factor. You can see it kind of pops the door open here, but it doesn't open all the way, and then you have to kind of push. It's got that motorized sound and feel to it. That is pretty much where the gimmicks end in my approximation, because when you really start using this car, you're like, damn, look at these materials. Like the laser etched at what looks like CSMCs in the door, but I know it's some type of other material. The leather work, the bright works and the switches, everything has a heft to it. The aluminum or the alloy grills for the speakers, which feel very, very well designed. All the fit and finish of all the panels is great in here. The stitching doesn't look cheesy. And when you look at the overall dashboard and the technology layout, the center gauge cluster, the screen is, essentially what you need to see. The viewing angle is good. The brightness and contrast is good. And the infotainment is probably their best implementation ever. It's clean. It looks elegant. It's not gimmicky or cheesy. Everything looks great in here. And my favorite part is almost every single control that you need to use is physical, with the exception of, like, of course, the copy and paste thing they did with the Mercedes here with the BlackBerry control, which you barely use, but like the center console where the shifter is, all physical. Brushed aluminum here. Even the infotainment command knob, it's all metal. It has a heft to it. And then they used screens like for the HVAC that are augmented with physical controls. Just an amazing design. The roof is all covered in a microfiber suede. There's noise canceling microphones all over the place. And then the back seat, of course, is where you're going to spend most of your time if you're buying a car like this. The passenger side rear reclines with an ottoman, and the infotainment in the back controls pretty much the entire car, and the interface in the back is unbelievably good. There's little details like turning on your massager back there, and you can adjust the roofline lighting or the lighting on the inside of the car to change it from cold color temperature, like 5500K if you like a bluer interior light, or like a warmer color temperature down to like 3200K. And then of course there's ambient lighting on top of that. I mean, it's just such an amazing space to be in. Just aside from all that, it's one of the quietest cars you're ever gonna get in as well. Seat adjustability, everything you want from a luxury car is top tier, including the audio system. We're gonna talk about some of the technical details in the shop now, so let's do it. All right, Jack, the G90. And many people think that we've given Hyundai and Genesis a bad rap recently, and that may be true in some of the videos. However, when we did the G80 Sport, the new version, I said that was like the best car that this company has ever made. And when you look at the body structure, which is what we're doing now, this is on the same platform as the G80, only extended out. The big difference here is typically Hyundai engineering and their management has said they don't want to overcomplicate things. So they didn't want to add all these insane electromechanical systems that like the Germans do to jack the price up and all that. But the G90 is a showcase piece for doing that finally. So you're getting this technology we don't typically see in their SUVs, the G80, and now they've added it here. So we're going to talk you through why this thing is special and the things that they've done, well, in some of the things they've done that nobody else has done, and some of the things that they're adopting for the first time.
And at face value, when you look at all this stuff underneath the car and you look at the price, you are getting a lot of car for your money. Mind you, this is still an expensive vehicle.
Yeah.
The variant we are underneath with all the options is about $100,000. When you look at the suspension components, much like the German counterparts, Everything's aluminum. Both the front and rear subframes are aluminum. Most of the primary control arms are aluminum as well. This car has rear steer and it has adaptive dampers. The adaptive air ride equipped dampers they call preview electronic control suspension. So each of the individual air bladders for the shocks can be controlled to soften or stiffen up the ride accordingly, and the preview function comes from checking GPS data and the front-facing camera, so it will preload or change the ride height of the front of the suspension of this vehicle up to 5 millimeters when it sees a bump in the road. And on top of that, if it encounters really bumpy roads or big bumps, it will raise the suspension both front and rear by 25 millimeters, both to soften up the ride and protect the undercarriage of the vehicle. When you're on a decline, say you're leaving a gas station or a restaurant or like a drive-through, it will also raise the suspension to save the front end of the vehicle automatically.
And this is all connected, as well as how the air springs work and how it stiffens and softens is also connected to drive modes. And this G90 is definitely the extreme end of all their cars because it has an ultra soft mode called chauffeur mode. And the big thing about this is Hyundai and Kia have never used air springs before, or air suspension. So this is really the first showcase of this, and it's all done in-house. It's all Mobis parts. It's not outsourced to like ZF, like the German manufacturers, or Acura. And even when you compare this to the Lexus LS, which is Lexus flagship, this annihilates that from a technology perspective. Again, like you said, this is all aluminum where the Lexus LS is not. This also incorporates, which we saw when these cars first came out, the aluminum subframe in the rear had spots for rear steer. This also adds rear steer to it. Because it's a long wheelbase car, it makes it feel way more nimble. And what's the actual specifications of it?
So it will change in low speed corners. It'll turn up to 4 degrees in the opposite direction. So it will turn in the opposite direction of the front wheels to decrease the turning radius. In high speed corners for extra stability or high speed turns, say you're on the Autobahn or something, or on I-80 doing 90 miles an hour, it will turn in the same direction up to 2 degrees. So it should add a little bit more stability at high speeds.
And the other part, too, of creating a luxury boat like this is you see this on every car, right? Everything is covered up here as much as possible. And there is an insane amount of research and development that went into reducing the road noise and wind noise to this car. So there's aerodynamic treatments, there's these covers, there is laminated glass in the rear windows as well as the front, which you typically don't see. And here's the magic, Jack. This is the first system that they've acoustically tuned the cabin to reduce road noise from 20 hertz to 500 hertz. So they took acoustic calibrated microphones and dummy heads and put it in the interior, and they tuned the DSPs in the audio system to measure road noise from every single tire through the cabin, and they can real-time send inverted waveforms to neutralize 20 to 500 hertz tones. To what it does to the ears is it sounds like it drops the noise floor, or it lowers the noise floor of the cabin by like 10 decibels up to that point in those frequency ranges. So what you're hearing, what it's tuning out, is all the noise that goes through the tires into the body of the car. So combined with the acoustic laminated glass, which reduces wind noise, which is usually what most car companies deal with in like this stuff, they're actually reducing tire noise and road noise through this acoustic system. So that's partly why Genesis, and even the cars that don't have this, Genesis has always been one of the most quiet cars, even compared to S-Class. It's incredible how much they've been able to reduce the unwanted turbulence from the outside environment. And that's what makes this special. You can kind of laugh at it, it's a big boat. A lot of us don't buy these huge luxury sedans, but at $100,000 for what you're getting here, it is really, really
it's every
amazing.
bit as quiet as something like the modern S-Class.
Absolutely. And then the last thing is the 3.5 liter, which is a carryover twin turbo V6 that we've seen, is adding port and direct injection. There's a whole bunch of things that they've done to this system, like putting the direct injection in the center part of the cylinder. There's a whole bunch of efficiency things that it does. The reason they're doing port and direct injection on this motor is because the DI engines tend to make more rattly type lower noise. It was rougher at lower RPM, so adding the dual injection there smooths it out, gives it lower noise, of course, transmission, and then, of course, fuel economy and emissions. They're able to control that better, and it's smoother overall in terms of performance. The big story is they've added a 48-volt system here with around a 9 kilowatt-hour battery, lithium-ion battery pack to supply this with around 45 more horsepower from the integrated starter generator to give it that more electric feel, more torque and power from the regular V6. And that's the big change with this engine. And this is kind of, they're saying this is the apex of internal combustion. So this will likely be their last like iteration of this before they go to full plug-in hybrid and all, like we're seeing with the G80 with electrified version. So this is kind of the last stand for this.
To be clear, the electric supercharger is not standard on this car. It is the more powerful, more expensive drivetrain option. And if you're watching this, you're like, why do I care? This is a G90. This is a $100,000 Hyundai Kia product. The one thing I will say about this brand, and we bring it up all the time, is this is an entirely vertically integrated company. They control every aspect of their supply chain other than tires.
Yeah, right.
And a couple other bits and bobs, which hopefully means, and why this is relevant, is this technology, because it's a flagship product, will start to trickle down to cheaper models and hopefully improve the entire Hyundai and Kia lineup.
Now that you have a better understanding of some of this technology, there's a lot more than that, but let's get this on the road and see how it translates, Jack.
All right.
I'm setting off in the brand new G90. As I talked about in the interior in the shop, there is a lot to this car, a lot to like. So with that said, I need to take off in chauffeur mode. So there's a lot to like about the driving experience if all you care about is one thing, and that is floating around like you're on a boat. If you're in chauffeur mode, it gets comically soft to the point where the suspension feels like all it has is compression. So when you get on bad bumps or sudden impacts, it just feels like more trampoline-like. And I found on almost 90% of surfaces it's amazing, including comfort mode. But when you hit really bad pavement, I prefer the suspension in sport mode. I think it does a better job driving and riding and handling most pavement conditions without still feeling really soft, but not feeling as choppy. So when we get into things like, well, transmission programming, and this is something I constantly give Hyundai and Kia and Genesis a hard time about, the transmission programming here is still a little bit lazy. If you switch it over to sport, it's just kind of like herky-jerky. It holds revs too much. You never want to use that. In comfort mode, it's very, very smooth. It takes off the rough edges of every single shift. You want to get going quickly. It's like just this wave of smoothness from the torque converter. It's exactly what you want from a car like this, and I don't have any problems with that. It's not as smooth and as refined as the Mercedes gearboxes and the Audi setups, but I think it's like 95% there for a luxury ride. So everything else, you're gonna look at this from one primary objective. How quiet is it? And as I talked about in the shop, that's where they spent some serious money electronically trying to dial out road noise, and then of course having laminated glass all the way around you makes a huge difference. And it's not like the G80 was loud or any other SUVs, but this is definitely one of the most quiet cars you're ever gonna get in. With the addition of the electric or 48-volt system with the mild hybrid setup, really all it's doing is giving you more torque. It's giving that instant surge of torque to supplement or, well, correct the fact that there's still turbo lag from the twin turbo engine. And this is a big car, so it's not gonna blow your doors off, it's not gonna blow you away with speed, and it's not about that. It's just adequate enough. It just has the enough amount of power that you want to get off the line quickly or to get going on the highway. There's never any issue with that. But the way that they've tuned the throttle, it's like lazy style. Even when you put your foot down really suddenly, it's like, just smooths every input out. And that's the same with the steering. This is just one lazy car, and it is amazing for it. The front seats to me and the comfort factor, the glass, the feeling of everything in here feels very expensive without being hyper gimmicky. And I think that's the big problem with a lot of luxury sedans that you're starting to see. They're like, well, we've done everything we can and now electric vehicles are coming out. People want something different. And this is like right at the perfect spot between trying to do what the Germans used to do well, from like taking Bang & Olufsen, having some of the Mercedes stuff in here, and having some of the BMW simpleness. I really think this is one of their best layouts, and I know it's going to get screwed up soon in favor of touch everything, but I really, really enjoy the way that this car drives. Now, if you're looking at it from any type of performance metric, how does it handle, how does it all that, it is always going to be soft. The responses are going to be slow. It's set up not to jostle your passengers. And that's the one thing that I will say. If you're looking for a little bit more, to steal the German word for everything, dynamics, you're going to have to go to like the Audi like S8 or something like that, or the 7 Series with, you know, some type of M performance handling package. But I really like this car overall, and I think their addition of air ride and, of course, rear wheel steering make a huge difference here in a car like this. It's easy to get around. It's easy to maneuver. If I had one complaint or a couple complaints, of course, like I said, it's always the transmission tuning could be better. And the ride definitely, the body does not feel as rigid, stretched out as compared to the G80. But I'm going to leave it at that. Let's get into the final thoughts. Final thoughts on the Genesis G90, and big shock, the moment I sat in this, I liked it. And there's something here that the G80 and the G90 have that their other products haven't had in the past, and that is cohesion. And when you look at it, things like the way they've integrated the hood, the headlights now, it feels purposeful. It feels more high-end rather than just like, let's try to make it cool. And whether you like the exterior or not, it's a big step up from what they've done in the past. And the interior is no different. The interior is some of the best work they've ever done because they understand how to implement technology and then leaving things alone for the buyer demographic. If you're spending $100,000, you don't want to be in here trying to fuck around with like touching everything, swiping things. Almost everything in here, the physical controls are great. They finally figured out how to do it well. Yes, there are some gimmicks like the door handles and the way the doors open, you know, with a motor and all that crap. That's not necessarily making it any better. But what they have done here in terms of the underbody, the mechanical part, all aluminum suspension, you have rear wheel steering, air ride that's transparent to the user, things that you have to spend well into the $125,000 to $150,000 range in the German counterparts. When you compare this to something like the Lexus LS, I mean, that car feels like 2 generations old compared to this. And I know this is a luxury barge. You can't judge it like you would judge other cars, but I'm so happy to see what they did here. This is some of their best work, and hope you get a chance to at least look at it, check it out, just sit in it, and just appreciate what they've done. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next video.